it's a big question, of course, and I tend to think that I would probably give a couple of different answers depending on which day you caught me on. But so this will be my story today when we meet today, and I guess, well, I'm thinking often that I'm sort of an extrovert introvert. I had some friends growing up, but I enjoyed also very much to be in my own worlds, creating my own worlds. And I was a reader and I watched stories, but I also wanted to take part in them. So I remember, for instance, in third or fourth grade, I formed a theatre company at school, where I was the director and I was the playwright, and I think I was even the treasurer. So there was a small membership fee, and I decided what plays we were going to do, and I also wanted to do the set designs and everything. Yeah, so I guess, yeah, I mean, an early interest in telling stories. Oh, radio! I loved radio, and like lots of kids, you know, you had a tape recorder, and where I did sound effects, and I performed all the characters and everything. But also, I guess, because I was also a drawer, a sketcher. So that was my thing that I sat in my room and I did sketches and created worlds that I filled with characters and everything. So I thought, actually, growing up, that it was going to be more of arts, and I did later on. I went to school for the arts, sculpture and drawing, and I had a workspace where I stood, you know, and it's hours and hours you stand there on your own. And at the same time, I had just sort of picked up this interest in the theatre as well again. So I was between those two worlds. Either I was going to apply to all the art schools and do that thing, but I was a bit bored, just, you know, did all day in the studio on my own, and I started to invite people and said, doing stuff, and, you know, could we do stuff together? And then there was a shift in some sort. We were doing a play when I was, I don't know, about 16 or 17 or something like that, and it was called Between Four Eyes or something like that. And it was different scenes from the classics. It was from The Storm, it was Streetcar Named Desire, Miss Julie, and one that is called Haren och Vråken by Lars Forssell. And it was just the love scenes. So we were 4 actors, 2 boys and 2 girls, and we just did the sort of the main love scenes. And I'd been doing theatre for quite some time then, but it was mostly that, you know, I was mimicking. I never got that real flow of becoming, but that happened with this project. And I remember it so vividly that, you know, we came out of, I think it was dress rehearsal or something, and something shifted. And it's like, I didn't have to make an effort I became, and I just, you know, it was like, you're conscious, but at the same time, it overtakes you and you're in a flow. And it was just, you know, it was addictive. I really wanted that. So I was actually I was at art school at the time, but I knew that, no, I have to do this more. And then for a long time, I was training as an actor, working as an actor, more and more. After a few years, started to again being more involved in the mechanics of the whole thing. You know, it was always that I wanted also to see, okay, so what's going on, you know, at with the set designs, and how are they working, and if you got the question, or could some people stay late and we're going to do the lights? Yeah, I could do that, you know, because I wanted to learn all about the different parts of how to tell this story. And of course, stage work in theatre is a collective process. So many people, even if you have, of course, you have the director, or maybe in some cases like a main producer who's sort of a showrunner and has maybe the main vision of the whole thing. But even the text in theatre, in a play, is a code. Yeah, because it's like it has to be so compressed. Yeah, I mean, literature of course is as well, but you can tell a story on stage maybe for an hour and a half, and it could be, you know, span, I don't know, eons of time if you want to. But also how the text is constructed is that you might have some stage direction. Yeah, such a person goes that way or picks that up or looks frightened, but it's just small things. The rest is for the collective to decipher together, sort of like, okay, what is this all about? And I think it's such a wonderful, sometimes people say, oh, Macbeth, yeah, I've seen that play. Yes, you saw a certain company performing that in that context and through the eyes of that director and the people that were involved. But that text could be something completely different with some other people. That was, I guess I came to that conclusion, or that came to me over the years, that I do enjoy being sort of, and I don't enjoy really saying that the actor is a pawn. It's not really, that's not the truth really, because the actor is, if you let them, is such a big and creative part of telling the story, of course, because it's like what that person brings, and if you're allowed to bring everything you have, and through this sort of, yeah, to reach that, and to be able to reach deep into yourself and bring that, you really, of course, set a mark on the show. But again, I became more and more interested in, okay, what would it be to actually write the story or direct it? So then I did a few years of that, playwright, and do children's plays and for young adults as well. And I was part of a theatre company that I'm still part of, where I had a lot of, I could do that. I was encouraged to do that, and we had an ensemble to work with, and it was amazing. And at the same time, I've sort of had this, I've had a dream since I was a kid, that, wow, to be able to write a full story in a book, But I sort of thought also that, well, yeah, maybe that's something else. Maybe that's not for me. I work with more with a code in this sense, and also I'm married to an author, and that's been his main work for a long time. So it was like, okay, I was doing playwriting, and he was the author. But then I was working with a monologue, with a story for the stage, and it was sort of semi biographical, and yes, and it was about to be staged, and I was working with the director and the producer. But then a few things happened in my life, and things happened in her life, in the director's life. So we had to shelve that project, and it was put on hold. And I think it was my husband who said that, like, now you have this story, and you always talk about that you want to try, see what your voice would be, as in literature, or like in a novel. So why don't you sit down? And we also had a publishing friend, and she said, well, I don't know. I mean, of course, I can't give you maybe that much time, but I could, if you sit down and really do the work and try to find your voice, I could come in and sort of check it out every once in a while. So I did that with my story and try to see what is it now, what is it that you add in comparison with what you do with the play, where as I said, it's so much to just have the main parts of the text and of the story, but without describing everything around it, because that's, like I said, you have wardrobe, you have lighting, you have the actors indeed, and everybody takes part of that. So it took me quite some time to sort of figure out what it is to not just tell the story, but to find a way of not describing what is happening, but really get life into these characters and let them actually tell the story without, now this person feels like this, and now they have these feelings, and now they're going through this, or the adjective, the depth of sort of like trying to describe everything. And it took me quite some time to start to figure that out. But I think also that I'm, as an author, I'm very much aided and have such strong help from my background as an actor and also as a playwright, because I mean I've been working major part of my life with analyzing text, and also as an actor with trying to grab hold of the psychology of this character. So, but now trying to get that down on paper, and it's so amazing, because now all of a sudden I was all those things that, as a collective at the theatre. Now I'm the director, I am wardrobe, I am set designer, I am, lighting director, everything, you do that yourself, and it's like an egotistical, feast in that sense, that you can do anything. In literature, of course, I mean, there are some playwrights that do that. I know that UNESCO, for instance, he would have like stage directions. By the end of one of his plays, it says like, and the ceiling opens up and the man flies away, which is, oh my God, thanks a lot. How do you do that on stage? But in literature, you can do anything. There's no limit. But at the same time, wonderful. I love it. Being able to move everything around. But at the same time, it's sometimes so devastating, because your fictional characters in a novel, they can't do anything by themselves. You have to write everything they do. They can't even stand up and walk across the room, or have a sip of water, because you have to do that for them every bloody time. Whereas if you have an actor, you can just like make a suggestion and see what they do. But I guess also, when it actually happens, that is in my writing, those are the times also which I really, I strive for, and I really enjoy that and it's so magical when that happens. You might have an idea what you were going to write today, or you set some goals, or maybe like, okay, I want to start with this chapter, or this is what I'm aiming for, and you sit down and you start working, start writing, and all of a sudden, and hopefully the characters takes over, and I especially with sort of if you do just the first draft, I really try to not disturb them if they start talking, if you know what I mean. It's like, okay, oh, I thought they were doing this, but instead they're doing that. Okay, just let them. And I almost like you follow along, or give them space to do that. And then after a while, maybe, in the editing, you might take it out. It might not be that good, but quite often, there's something there that you can use for something else. Yeah. So I guess, well, yeah, what has shaped me as a storyteller, I guess, is all sorts of things that I've been, subjected to, but also I think I make up stories, or I write stuff because I try to figure out stuff. It's quite chaotic to be a human being. And also I think I realized in my teens that I do have problems sometimes with following my train of thoughts, really, all the way up to a conclusion. If it's just in my head, if I just try to sit down and think, and I get lost, and that would be very frustrating at times. And I've had, some problems with that. But when I started to write things down, when I was keeping a journal, or I saw something that mapped things out, or just like that, and I think that is what great art is. You can take so many different things from it, but when it does that, it might just be a movement or a piece of text or what have you, and on a not fully conscious level sometimes, and quite often, you just get something. It like sharpens your mind, or it opens it up, or it's like, oh, I didn't really know I was looking for that, but that is a sort of a clue, or a part of the puzzle. And so whether it's a play, or a piece of music, or film, I don't know, it's just, yeah, I feel so blessed to be able to do this now as my job, and yeah, it's still, yeah, it's quite amazing. Yeah. So this what was thought as being to become a monologue for the stage, that was that became my debut novel, and it's called Down Under. And it's called that also because and this is a very, or a semi, or is it a full biographical novel? It is. I mean, it is fiction, but it's very much based on my own life. Yes, I think we have it here. Yeah, here it is, and it's a coming of age story, and it's about a 19-year-old boy who, during his coming out period, yeah, that sort of, it doesn't go very smoothly, and he gets very confused and sort of have the idea of, okay, my whole identity needs to change. Maybe it's easy if I just leave my old life. We're going to cut everything backwards and start anew somewhere else. So he lives in Stockholm, Sweden, but and in end of the 80s he goes to sort of the antipode of Stockholm, to Auckland, New Zealand, where he has family, thinking, I can just wipe out everything behind me and become this new person. But he soon find out that that's not very easy to do. You bring it with you. So we follow his story. What happens is that he moves in with his relatives, but when they find out that he's gay, they throw him out. But instead of going back home, he sort of picks himself up slightly, and so the story is about, we follow him during a year in New Zealand, and all the things that happens to him there. But at the same time, we follow a parallel story that starts when he's in second grade or something like 8 to 9 years old, up to that day when he decides to leave Sweden and never come back. And it did fairly good, fairly well. So I was invited to try it again at the publishers, and then so my second novel was this one, Hästpojkarna, the Horse Boys, and both these are young adult genre, or that's what they. But I've been also fortunate. I wanted it to be sort of like from maybe 15 or 16 years old and upwards, and both of them have actually been sort of crossover novels and read by adults as well, which I'm very happy about. The Horse Boys, I'm a horse boy myself. I grew up with horses from the age of 7 or 8, so until I was 16. And I lived, I was at the stables, I lived there, I worked there, and that was my life. Again, I think also I knew that I wanted to write about that very specific and very peculiar and amazing relationship between a young person and this huge animal. And I mean, a 7-year-old boy, and I was really scrawny, and all of a sudden, you're let into the box of this magnificent but really big and powerful animal. But also they're very they're tentative. You have to adjust. You have to realize their power and their strength. And also I think that at the stables I found sort of refuge from some bad things that were happening in my life at the time. I was for a while quite badly bullied at school, and this was my sort of my haven, or my refuge, in a sense, where I could get away from this stuff. I knew I wanted to go back and write about that in some way. Also, I wanted to. This was during 2014-15, and we had things happening, especially in this country, but around Europe and in the world, with maybe not just conservative ideas, but more right-wing ideas coming into the politics. And we had a political party coming into almost governing. And I was taken aback by, how this could happen, and also that it's so easy to think that just because we made progress with human rights, or especially in the LGBT community, we have laws, and Sweden and the Nordic countries are privileged, and in the sense that we have come a long way, but history tells us, and everyday news tells us, that it's human rights and progress is never just here to stay by itself. You have to work for it. And now we saw, a lot of change, and also that the discourse was starting to change a little. And but at the same time, there was a completely different time to be an LGBT person in the world compared to when I was growing up. So I wanted to see, you know, what was it to be a young person coming out today. So these are also, again, two parallel stories, but now we go back even further, and it's not really my story. So my horse boys, they are growing up in an orphanage in outside Prague in the 1920s, early 1920s. But they are treated quite badly, and they run away from there, grow up instead with a circus company, and by the late 20s, early 30s, they come to Berlin, to Paris and to Berlin, and this is where they find their tribe, because they realize also in the early teens that they are a couple as well. Yeah, so they are part of that amazing and almost mythological era, which is the Weimar era, but in the 20s and the early 30s. So they have that, and they become a part of that, very much so, about the underground culture at the time. But they're also there when the National Socialists come to power, and Hitler, becomes the dictator that we know today. So and we, as a reader, we get to know the story of these people, because one of these boys, he will grow old in Sweden. And my 2014 boy, who's 19 years old at the time, he works as a caretaker for elderly people, and make friends with this old guy. So I wanted to tell this sort of epic story about then and now, and because my chaos was that at the time, and still is, that, you know, what is happening, you know. Yes, it's easier, maybe as a minority, sometimes you think that, well, okay, your goal is that you shouldn't have to have parades or you know, to fight for things, but at the same time you need to, I think we need to know our history, and also because, you know, I was so fascinated by that whole era, and so that's that one. And then my latest novel is it's this one. It's called Inte död än, Not Dead Yet. Very upbeat title. And that is a story. I think there was, like, my grandmother, when she was old, and she was in the hospital, and I came to visit, and she was like in this sort of trance situation, I think, you know, and I just sat on a chair beside her bed, and when she came to, she said, oh, you know what, I've been back, you know, I was back at the farm where I grew up, and I was about 6 years old, and I went into to the stables, and I remembered the names of all the cows, and it was like I was there. It was not just a memory, I was there. And then she started to try to go back and see if she could get into this to this trance-like thing again, and I wanted to do something about sort of looking back on a life story. And I guess also because, you know, when I was younger, I looked upon life and death in a different way. Now it's like, life is finite in a way. I mean, that's all we know, for certain anyway. And at the same time, I also had a relationship with my father, who had become quite sick for a while, and he had that almost like a classic change of, almost like a personality change in the sense that, you know, he came out from this period of like, you know, nearly losing his life and wanted to change things, and him and me became much more close as well. And I didn't really know what I wanted to do with it, but I started having conversations with him and sort of asking him about his upbringing and his life. So, and I didn't know for a long time what I wanted to do with it. And in my head, I had a working title which was almost like the dad book or something like that. But I knew after a while that I needed to free myself from the actual biographical material. So this is a story about an old man. Yes, he's 84 years old, and he has a heart attack on Christmas Eve, and almost the whole novel takes part from his bed at the hospital, and he finds himself in this situation where there's like sort of almost like a tear in time, like a rift in time and space, where the first time it happens, he wakes up in his 4-year-old self's body, back when he'd just been he was a foster child. He was placed there when he was 3.5 years old, and so he finds himself in that kitchen where he was like 70 years ago, or even more, and so and now this thing starts with that he gets to go back to really important or life-changing moments in his life, and maybe realizing also that you know, sometimes he's just sort of a fly on the wall, and sometimes he's in his actual body, but with the intelligence and the stories of his adult self. You know, he has both worlds, and so. But this time, maybe he's like, when he's sort of fly on the wall, it's an hour after he was actually in that situation. He gets to hear things that he didn't at that time. His birth mother, his biological mother, you know, why did she send him away? Things that, because he never got to talk with her about them. They never cleared that, but now he sort of gets an understanding. Not that, you know, everything now is okay. So, yeah, people do shit. People do, you know, carry a lot of grudge, and he himself has done that his whole life. So it's like, yes, he gets the opportunity to look back at a life that maybe, yeah, it might have turned out, you know, better than he thought it would, in a sense, but sort of worse than he had hoped it to be. You know, there were a lot of dreams, a lot of things that didn't happen. Yeah. So that's those are my three novels, my 3 books, yeah. So, yeah, I mean, I don't really know. I mean, I have a process that is changing all the time, I guess, but up to now, it has been, what I try to do is that I try to, and I've done that also when I've been working as a playwright, I want to get as much sort of writer's food as possible. I collect things, I collect small things, you know, maybe I do even playlist for my characters. I do research a lot. I do it like sort of almost like a chapter skeleton treatment, if you like, and then when I have all that, and different documents with all things. Then I sit down and I do my first drafts. I want to do that, not to have that done for too long a time. I want to sit down and do that as fast as possible. But and then when I have that, then I do editing a lot. And parallel, I might do more research, but I think that, you know, when I get that out, and as I said before, in that process, I don't want to stop myself too much. But then when I have that, the editing starts, and that's where the actual book happens. The work starts for me, and I love that. I really enjoy the editing. So yeah, that's more or less my process. And I'm just starting that now because I've started working on my next novel, and so it's that amazing time, and at the same time it's so scary because every time up to now anyway, it's been like I don't really remember how I did last time, and I know lots of people say that, you know, it's almost scary in the way that, you know, wow, I mean, I with the last one I had all the material and I knew so much about it, and now it's just so fragile, and so I'm in that process now of sort of trying to collect everything I can to have as much, as I said, food to be able to start with this new project. And again, it's it's parts from my own life, and also in a grander story. And I think about sometimes I'm not writing in a genre per se. I write stories about people, often based in my own life. And as it's been in all these, there is an LGBT theme kind of, and again in this new one also, I guess I could say I was part of a religious or a spiritual movement for quite some time, which changed me a lot. And I've been really interested the last couple of years of trying to figure out, you know, the person I am today and the person I was at the time, and how these processes work, and how these processes, how they work, in the sense that you think you know yourself, and then all of a sudden, and you know, quite often when we're talking about cults or sects or movements like this, you often think that it's just people. We tend to think that maybe this is people who are, I don't know, a certain kind of people that are easy targets for these things, but it is. It's quite strong forces that we're talking about. So I'm really looking forward to dive into it, but I'm also a little scared.